This video relates to section 1 of the history paper, the document case study, and specifically Stalin's show trials. So looking at the causes and the purpose of these trials, there were the Purges. So Stalin was extremely paranoid during his stay in power and made every effort to rid Russia of his opponents. The Purges, otherwise known as the Great Terror, lasted from 1934 until 1939 and saw Stalin order the assassination of political critics and traitors and spies, as he called them. They began with the murder of Sergei Kirov, which was probably orchestrated by Stalin's team. The NKVD, Stalin's secret police, arrested millions of Russians during the terror, and informers were everywhere. Party leaders, industrial leaders, clergy members, former nobility, and old Bolsheviks were arrested in an attempt to gain complete control over the Communist Party. No one in history has ever watched such war on his own people, according to Dmitry Volkogonov, Russian historian. Stalin also ordered the purge of the Red Army, wherein 50% of Russian army officers were shot. The purges fed directly into the show trials, which were a veiled attempt to exterminate political opposition to Stalin. Stalin also seized the opportunity to make use of propaganda on a domestic and international level. Stalin already had control of the country's newspapers and radio stations and wanted to use the trials to convince the rest of the world that his regime was fair and lawful. Foreign journalists and spectators were invited to view the trials and were sat in crowds of NKVD members in plain clothes, dressed to look like ordinary citizens. Stalin had introduced a series of 5-year plans to Russia with the idea of improving the economic and social situation. Socialism in one country was Stalin's main objective, which aimed to successfully implement communism in Russia before looking to the rest of the world. State control over farms through collectivization was implemented as part of these plans, and Russia became a command economy where the state had all control of goods and produce. Collectivization led to man-made famine, as Stalin demanded that farmers make unrealistic quotas and peasants began to kill livestock and burn produce in protest. Stalin used the show trials to blame others for these failures in his plans. Andrei Vyshinsky presided over the trials and was notorious for being an unpleasant judge to deal with. The first show trial is known as the Trial of the 16 in 1936. Lev Kamenev, Grigory Zinoviev, and 14 other Bolsheviks were tried. They had been interrogated by the NKVD and confessed under torture to killing Sergei Kirov and plotting against Stalin. Kamenev and Zinoviev confessed because Stalin had promised to spare their families if they publicly confessed. Stalin had their families shot regardless. One defendant even admitted to the murder despite the fact that he was already in prison at the time. Stalin was present at the trial behind a darkened screen. All 16 were found guilty and shot. The second show trial, the Trial of the 17 in 1937. Yuri Pyatakov, Karl Radek, and 15 others were charged and found guilty with similar crimes. All 17 seemed eager to prove their own guilt. Radek was put in prison after the trial, where he died, and the rest were shot. The third show trial happened in 1938, and it was the trial of the 21. 21 men, including Nikolai Bukharin, Nikolai Kristinsky, Alexei Rykov, and former leader of the NKVD Yagoda, were charged with various crimes, including murder, espionage, and conspiring against Stalin. Kristinsky actually pleaded not guilty, but confessed the next day after a night with the NKVD, and Bukharin attempted to defend the actions that he confessed to committing. Despite this, the rest of the defendants admitted to crazy crimes and were all shot apart from 3 insignificant figures. In terms of the results of these trials, Stalin succeeded in ridding the Communist Party of those that he viewed as threats to his position, and also had successfully forced the blame for the failure of his 5-year plans onto the executed men. Stalin also got what he wanted from the trials regarding propaganda. Having allowed the world's press into the trials, people were convinced that Communist Russia was a lawful and just society. The US ambassador to Russia was easily convinced that the executed were guilty of their crimes. The International Association of Lawyers saw that the accused were sentenced quite lawfully. For more notes on history and other subjects, visit 625points.com.